somewhere. Was it Texas or was it Canada? Drinking whiskey in the morning light, and I worked the stage all night long.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to episode 20 of Bell to Bell with Bobby Blaze. I am your host, Jeremy Vilmer, and now the star of our show, Bobby Blaze.
Hey, Jeremy, man, it's October, brother. Thanks for having me back to my own show. Of course, I always think, yes, just the way I am, because I feel like it's our show. And like you said, man, can you believe it's episode 20, man? And today, we're going to be talking about the bloodiest matches. I'm going to kind of let you set up the theme for the month if you don't care. But Thanks a lot. I'm glad to be back. And welcome all you wrestling fans and just casual fans of the Bell to Bell with Bobby Blaze podcast.
Yeah, this month, so people that don't know me out there, I love horror movies. I love scary shit. My grandson's favorite things are skeletons and spiders. So I just love spooky stuff, and it kind of carries throughout the family. October is one of my favorite months of the year. It starts to cool down. And, you know, Halloween, the girls start dressing trampier, and it's just a funner time of year. With that being said, we're going to have a couple different theme changes for this month. We're going to be coming to you from wrestling venues that are also at sites that are famous for other reasons. So this week we are coming to you from the Camp Crystal Lake Rec Center in New Jersey. Bobby, I noticed it's a little dusty. It doesn't look like anybody's been here for a while.
Apparently not.
Yeah. So the rumor is some kid drowned here in 1958, and then his mom went nuts and killed a bunch of people. And then ever since then, some masked man has been showing up and killing other people who come to this location. But I'm not a superstitious guy, so I'm not really worried about it.
Yeah, we're not too worried about it, man. You know, I don't worry so much more about Friday the 13th as I do Saturday the 14th.
A lot of cleanup on that day.
Yeah. Friday the 13th series, they're out there on Crystal Lake at the Rec Center. Don't go in there, man. I swear, those scary movies, I always want to just, yell that kind of stuff out, like, no, he's in there, don't run, dumbass, don't, kind of thing, or whatever. But I think that movie kind of was the one that kind of started the whole slasher film of the 80s, if I'm not mistaken. That's one of the earlier ones.
It is one of the earlier ones, but
that's what I thought.
There's three movies that are often credited as starting the slasher craze.
Yeah.
The first one I think was called Black Christmas, but it was real early 70s or maybe 1969.
Okay.
I might get the name of it wrong. Then, of course, Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 1974.
Yes.
And then Halloween in 1978 is really credited as the beginning of the slasher series, because all the pieces of the formula fell into place with that one.
Yeah. I thought you was going to mention one from 74 and also Halloween from 78. Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I saw that in the back of a damn station wagon, at the drive-in.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things that we got to go to. It's a lot better with, I think they showed like the Boogeyman or something, whatever it was back there, a Bigfoot thing or something. But, it's one of those double or triple features at the drive-in.
Was it like Boggy Creek or?
Yes, that was the one that had a real, that fucking Sasquatch. I think he's just naturally fucking blurry anyway. It's not I think he's just a blurry dude,
It's not the camera, it's just him.
The first one you said was, what was that one?
It was one of the first. It's one of those evil Santas, and I'm hoping I got the name right. It's Black Christmas, and it's where a guy dressed as Santa is like stalking people in a house.
Gotcha. Okay.
Apparently, originally Halloween was pitched to be a sequel to it, and then they went in a different direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But those
maybe we'll talk about that later this month.
Yeah.
You've kicked some good ideas around, and I'm glad you mentioned all those, and I'll have to check that one out, man. So we're coming from the Crystal Lake Rec Center, man. Hell's far. Wonder if we'll draw a crowd. The people will be too scared to fucking show up out there, probably.
I don't even think the cleaning service shows up. I'm pretty sure I saw a head in the bathroom. So.
Oh man, you're doomed. You're all doomed.
Oh, yeah, Bobby. So we're going to talk about 10 of the bloodiest matches in pro wrestling history. But before we get to that, is there any shout-outs or anything you want to do this week?
Yes, I've got one. I could probably go on for about 3 or 4. We talked about several people prior to going on air, but I'm going to send my one shout out to the good people over there at Saturday with Chicken Duck podcast. I was a guest on there this past week. Patreon members can get it today and tomorrow, and then it comes out Saturday for free on the it's Saturday with Chicken Duck. And they had a real good crew, and we had a good they gave me a little platform to talk on and get our podcast out there, get my books out there, and just talk about my career. You know, they were familiar with me, but not, all the things we've talked about on here. So, kind of filled everyone in, hit a different crowd, hopefully, and that's good for business, I hope.
Yeah, good.
I was glad to be on it. And I know you're over there on the Geekish Cast still on your podcast, so That's good. Give them both a plug.
Exactly. Well, and while we're doing that, I want to remind everybody, and I'll do this again when we do the countdown, but you can get Bobby's book, Pin Me, Pay Me, by going to tinyurl.com/blazebook1, and you can get his other one, I Kicked Out Onto the Education of a Wrestler, by going to tinyurl.com/blazebook2. And Bobby, if people want to find us on Twitter, where can they look?
Yep, you can find Jeremy at the geekishcast.com. You can, but yeah, on Twitter he's at the geekishcast. I'm sitting there looking at my computer. Quit reading your computer, Bob, and just go with what you know. The geekishcast, and that's on Twitter. And then you can find me on Twitter at BobbyBlaze744, or you can find us both under a joint account. And I want to take my hat off, and I do have one on, to Jeremy, because he runs that page, and he's got over 13. We have over 1,300 people, but he's the one that does all the adding and people coming on, man. It's really, really great. But it's called Bell to Bell Blaze. And it's on Twitter at Bell to Bell Blaze. And we've got a lot of reaction this week, it seems like. And when Jeremy responds, of course, he puts a J. A lot of times I just respond from my own Bobby Blaze 744. But if I do, do it off the page, I just put, Bobby, of course, or I put a B, actually. But, so Jeremy, thanks so much for running that. Again, Jeremy can be found at the Geekish Cast. I could be found at Bobby Blaze 744, or follow our joint account at Bell to Bell Blaze. And that's our podcast page.
All right. Well, that being said, everybody, if you're listening, you like what you hear, please give us all a listen, or all a like and a follow on Twitter. We are on Facebook. You just go on there and search for Bell to Bell with Bobby Blaze. We have a group and a page. You can like one and join the other. And that being said, I wanted to do a quick news update because I found something to be really cool going on right now in the world of wrestling that I haven't really kept up with for a long time because I was so bored of it. Cody Rhodes is now the NWA World Champion, the IWGP US Champion, and 1/3 of the ROH 6-man tag champions.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And you're stoking my interest in it too, man. That's the thing, Jeremy. I can, just from the time we started talking, and a little bit over a year and a half ago, maybe.
Yeah, right about.
And our interest, I've noticed it in him, and he's really turned me on to it. I know we talk about a lot of old school wrestling and stuff, but Jeremy does keep up, and he keeps me up with a lot of stuff that's going on out there, and it keeps our fans, let them know, hey, we're still professional wrestling fans. But this NWA, man, it's kind of really got me interested again. Like Jeremy says, the first pay-per-view you bought here in 20 odd years or whatever, and that's great, man, because we talk about pro wrestling. And I think it's on the upswing again, man. And good for Cody, and good for the NWA. And I did see the IWGA?
IWGP, yeah. The
GP, yeah. Seemed like I saw a tweet or two about that. Also, I know they've got the NWA 70th anniversary show coming up, if I'm not mistaken. I've been reading a little bit about that.
Yep.
I think that's later this month, correct?
I believe that's the third weekend of the month in Nashville, if I'm not mistaken.
I think you're correct.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
And they're gonna crown a new NWA national champion that night too.
Okay, that's what you talking about. Is that the second title to unfold?
Yes.
Okay.
So apparently their plan is to have a world title, a national title, a world tag team, and a women's championship. Shortly is kind of their plan.
Yeah.
So I'm really interested to see how they roll all this out because they don't have a home promotion.
Yeah.
They literally have titles that are traveling but don't have a home promotion. So I'm interested to see how this is all going to work, especially since these guys all belong to other wrestling promotions and have access to competing for these titles. It's going to be interesting.
Well, maybe that's the trend. Maybe that's, that may just very well be their goal. Maybe they're not going to have a home base per se, but have the traveling champions. They just go and, you mentioned Ring of Honor and, Japan.
New Japan.
They did that show here, as well. So, they did a West Coast swing, 2 years ago, or was that last year?
I think it was last year and maybe the year before, but they had enough, New Japan got enough interest that they released a U.S. title.
Right, yeah.
So,
Good deal, man.
Yeah, and so, there was a time, Bobby, and we'll get on the topic here in a second. There was a time when you brought a wrestler into your territory to bring people into the building.
Mm-hmm.
And putting these titles on these guys and letting them go from promotion to promotion with them. We're going to see more of that, is my feeling, instead of just WWE comes to your territory and you watch John Cena versus Triple H.
Yeah.
Again. Or whatever. Yeah. So, hopefully we'll see some guys that get to not have to sign a long-term one-person contract, get to travel around, make some money, and I'm hopeful for the first time as a wrestling fan since the mid-90s.
That's
all
awesome
I have to say.
man.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
All right.
Let's get on for our podcast here, our topic, and it's going to be the bloodiest matches. Our top 10 bloodiest matches. And with that said, let me just say this before we get into it, and I'll let Jeremy start us off. The guys, we're glad you listened to the podcast, and Jeremy can kind of explain the process. He used the term trading horses. That's kind of what we do. We have a list of guys, and I'll let him go into more detail about that. But here's what I want to say. That is, these are all professional matches. This is not any of the trash can garbage matches, or, not going to talk about some of the guys that just go out there and it's hardcore type matches where there's just a bloodbath for the sake of saying, we're going to have a bloodbath kind of thing. And that's, and the people that, we appreciate all the people that's, hit the BBBB hashtag and send us in their suggestions. With that said, I think I'm speaking from Jeremy and myself. We're not historians. We're wrestling fans. So we got down to our 10 on our list, and we hope you enjoy that. And I'll let Jeremy kind of explain that to you a little bit more in detail, and then we'll start with number 10. How's that, Jeremy?
Yeah, that's fine.
We do a process is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, so anytime, and I covered this last week a little bit, and I'll just quickly wrap it up again.
Yes.
But what happens is once we choose a topic, whether it's a wrestler or a type of whatever, Bobby and I start throwing names at each other. And then we start doing I can live without this guy. If you want that guy, I'll take him off my list. And what we do is we go from about 20 to 12 to 14. And that's when we get to the brass tacks. Like, I can live without this guy. And then you might, I'll say I can do without this guy. And then you might go, well, you know what? Hold on. Because while this guy's my favorite, your guy would work in this one better, or your whatever. And so we do that till we get 10, and then we do it again where we take our 10 and go, who should be number 10, who should be number 1, and then we start filling in the centers, then we get that list, and then one more time we go through, I think 9 and 8 should switch, whatever. Yeah. And then that's how we get to our 10. Yeah. This week we have, like Bobby said, we've always got a few caveats to how we do this. These are 10 of our favorite bloodiest matches. They may not be the bloodiest matches ever in history, because honestly, you could just say CZW, XPW, FMW, and ECW. Pick any 10 matches. There you go. Yeah. And we're done. What we've tried to do is take wrestling matches where blood was used to tell a story, rather than bloody matches where wrestling is incidental.
Yeah.
Now that being said, there's a couple, and that being said, there's a couple in here where we're going to look and go, hey, nobody used a figure 4 or anything more technical than a headlock during this whole match, but that's kind of how we approached it. Thank you everybody who threw out your choices for bloodiest matches, and I'm sure we will probably revisit this in a different form again. With that being said, Bobby, I'm going to go to number 10.
Okay.
Which is the War Games, 1987, the Horsemen versus the Superpowers.
Wow, yeah, what a great opener right there, man. War Games 87.
Yeah.
So we had the Horsemen, So you got 4 there. Then we had who? The Superpowers. Is that what you called them?
Yep. Well, so the Horseman, the Horseman was with Luger, and J.J. Dillon came with him.
Yeah,
so
I saw Dillon.
Yep, 5 on that side. The Superpowers, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, and I'm hoping I'm not spoiling anything for anybody, but first the Road Warriors come out. It was fucking 40 years ago, so
Yeah. If you haven't
30.
seen it by now, the great thing about this, I get to go back and when they're available, we see the footage of this stuff, and that's really awesome.
Yeah.
So,
but I think this was right after Magnum was injured. So the Road Warriors come out with Dusty, and then Nikita Koloff comes out for his first face position with them, and the crowd went fucking bonkers. That was really cool.
And lots of blood.
Lots of blood. There was blood within the first 5 minutes of the match. J.J. Dillon was bleeding so bad by the end of the match that it had an anticlimax because they had to get him out of the ring.
But yeah, that's a good. Anything else to say on it? Because I think that's a great number 10 to open up with. If you're just looking, that was a good match to open up with. War Games '87.
Yeah, I think that's a solid one to start from.
Okay, of course, that was 1987.
Yes, sir. That was not the 87th War Games.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's going to take us to number 9. And this one here happened in 1979 in Tupelo, Mississippi. Jeremy, you know where Tupelo's at?
I know the King is from Tupelo.
Well, it's right below One Below. But anyway. Boom, boom. Be here all week, folks. Tupelo, Mississippi, man, the concession stand brawl. This was an early onset match. It was just Lawler and Dundee was in the ring against the Moondogs. Lance Russell, calling the action there at the old Memphis, wrestling. Maybe whatever's on the air, whatever you can see on YouTube now, it's on there. But there's at some point the Moondogs go over. Spoiler alert for you people still living in 1978. This happened in 1979. So the thing about I want to say about this before I give some of the details of the matches, we talked a little bit off air, and I said I was going to say something, and that's this. I've kind of touched on this before. Is a lot of times in your mind things didn't happen like you remember them happen, like you wanted them to happen, And I found this out on when I was doing research for my book. I was checking a couple things. I actually did some fact checking. I knew this was around 78 or 79, but what I remembered about this in my mind was. And I had to go back and correct myself because it's Lawler and Dundee against the Moondogs with Lance Russell. So there's your setup. They're in the ring wrestling, and the Moondogs go over, and then Lawler and Dundee take the belts from them and start gimmicking. Boom, boom, boom. So they got a little bit of color. I think Dundee does for sure. And then they start taking it out, and Lance is kind of like cutting away from the air. And you think the show is going off because it's a blank screen for a couple of seconds. There's... whether it be dead air on the radio or dead on TV, that's a long time sometimes. But you can hear Lance talking. And before I get to the concession stand brawl, what I remembered in my head was that happening and going to school on Monday and talking about, did you see that? Did you see that? But then I looked at the date, and I think it happened in early June, which means school would have probably been out. So it had to be when the guys got together. I was telling another guy this is my recollection. So we had to either went to the pool or the basketball court or wherever we was at, hanging out at, because school would have been out, and that's where me and my buddies would have talked about it. Does that make sense? But in my mind, I was like, oh, yeah, we got up, went to school on Monday, and that was what everyone was fucking talking about, kind of like the old water cooler, Yep. But where it happened in June of 79, school would have been out, so we probably got together, out of friends playing basketball at the pool or whatever. But fuck, did we talk about that thing, for weeks, And at that time, I was going on 16 years old, and still, obviously a wrestling fan, and some of the guys were older. They was loving. I mean, it's just crazy. But they go off the air, or you think they are, and they go down, and there's Lawler and Dundee in the concession stand in Tupelo, Mississippi, and they're throwing mustard at each other, fucking hot dogs, and I think they broke everything in there except for the popcorn machine. I think that's one of the things. You don't touch the fucking popcorn machine is what the promoter said, if I'm not mistaken, from listening to other podcasts and watching YouTube, etc. But yeah, so number 9, if you haven't seen it, go back and watch this from 1979. It's the Tupelo, Mississippi concession stand brawl with Lawler and Dundee versus the Moondogs. So
that is one of those matches that lives in legend.
Yes.
When I was younger, obviously it had been a few years gone by. That was a match that people still talked about. And every time you see people fight with paper cups and mustard bottles and stuff like that, this is the match that they're trying to go back to. This is their callback point. This is the touchstone of food fights in pro wrestling.
Here you go.
And you're right. I mean, these guys got blood on them before they got back there, and then everybody just kind of went batshit crazy and started hitting each other with anything that wasn't nailed down.
Yeah. That's a good number 9. And as you can see, the other matches from War Games, that was an angle leading up to that specific pay-per-view for the War Games. This one here started off in blood. You pretty much knew at some point in War Games someone would probably bleed, but that was a match to not necessarily to bleed, but to keep the guys in the cage. It's fucking War Game, the war.
Yeah.
This one here is where we're kind of going to is the guy started in the ring that's having a wrestling match, and it escalated to a fucking brawl where blood became involved. And that's why it comes in at number 9. And I know you've got a really good one at number 8. I'm going to let you lead us into number 8. And I like this.
Yeah, number 8 is from 2004 Judgment Day. Eddie Guerrero versus JBL. And this is a point in wrestling or sports entertainment, since we're talking specifically. I'm just trying to give it context. Because
let me get a Casey King fucking shout out there for Casey, because he's always talking about, I'm young, I love pro wrestling, and I'm not saying it was fucking dirty words, Casey, but Jeremy just now said them. It's from 2004, Eddie Guerrero, JBL, Judgment Day. Take over, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, not a period with tons of blood after Vince won all the wars and was the only promoter left standing. JBL blasts Eddie with a chair, and the next thing you know, Eddie Guerrero looks like a stuck fucking pig. There was so much blood in this match. I mean, honestly, if you were to do just a match by the amount of blood in it, this would be really high on the list. It was just because Eddie accidentally clipped an artery in his forehead. And so what should have been a little bit of blood, and Bobby, I'm sure you can expand on this a little bit. What should have been enough blood to paint half his face became enough to soak the ring in 2 whole men. So.
Yeah. Man, I had to. You sent me a list there that had, I'm sure several people saw several different lists, and that was on about all of them. And it had some highlights from the match, just the pictures of it. I was like, golly, he's covered. And I was still watching back then too, so I'm not sitting there claiming I sit there and watch that particular pay-per-view or whatever, but I was familiar with that when you wrote me. I was like, oh man, that was fucking bloody. Yeah, sometimes that gig, man, especially if you got an artery. And, it's no secret. People talk about, I know you guys use blood capsules or this and that, or something like that. Those days are long gone because the business has been so exposed now. It's, there's, you can get a hard way, of course, and that's, Eddie probably went to, just get the gimmick there in the right spot, and, hand slipped or moved or, the gimmick hit him, and boom, you slice an artery, man. And you're already out there. That's the thing about, juicing in a match. You're already out there, man. You're sweating, especially the blonde hair guys. Well, I know Eddie's dark hair. I'm saying, like, some of the guys, we're going to talk about on our list here, man. That sweat gets going and that blood, and your blood pressure's up because you're out there working out. It's like, excruciating exercise, man. And, that blood is just going to pump out of your head, especially if you hit an artery. But, that's the other thing is like, the excitement, you're so excited to be out there performing for, these thousands, millions of fans on that stage. And, depends on a building, building's hot and sweaty too, adds to it. The smearing without trying to sound gross or whatever. I mean, you go grab a guy in a headlock, you got it all over the other guy's side, and he's sweating now it's on his chest. I mean, it's just, like you said, enough to cover 2 men in the fucking ring.
Yep.
That's a lot of fucking blood.
Oh yeah. And if you look, I mean, I have a shaved head. I've cut myself on the head accidentally, and I'm talking tiny nicks.
Yeah.
That bled forever. And if you get out on a hot day and you've got even like a bump that might open and you got sweat and blood, it just goes everywhere.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things you see in this match. Every time he turns his head, blood splatters in one direction or another. It was a seriously bloody match, and definitely deserves to be on any bloody match list.
Yeah. And you know the thing about that you mentioned a little bit earlier, sometimes the middle of this list is the hardest part when we start getting down to, because Eddie and JBL, this match could have been, 7 or 6 or maybe as high as 5. It just depends. If you went on blood alone, it may have went higher on someone else's list. It's just number 8 on our list, man. Mm-hmm. So that's just the way it came in. But with the amount of blood, like you said, it could have been a lot higher. The number 7, let's go to number 7. That was Sergeant Slaughter versus the Iron Sheik from 1984, and I think it was a boot camp match, if I'm not mistaken.
You are correct. It was a boot camp match going along with Sergeant Slaughter's All-American look and military background. It was boot camp. They had a few of these matches, as I understand it, but the last one, I believe, was in June of 84.
Yes.
And it's hard to find. I mean, if you get out there and dig around, you'll find it, but it ends up with just shit covering the ring and blood everywhere.
Yeah.
Weapons and garbage and blood. And, for those of you who are too young to remember it, 1984 was just 5 years after Iran had a revolution and become one of our major enemies, held our people hostage, our ambassadors hostage. It was a hated time back then for Iranian people. Sheik was a great foreign menace. He's kind of a madman. The only words you ever really hear him say to anybody these days are, "Fuck you, Bubba."
Yeah. I'll fucking jump on you. I tell you. No. Yeah. But yeah, that match, the thing I remember is, and I'm not claiming I sit here and watched this back in 1984, but thereabouts, there was a couple of these matches. The one I saw was from Landover, Maryland, and what I knew I had seen either. I won't say this particular match, but one of the boot camp matches, or at least a match between Slaughter and Iron Sheik, and that is this. Not in person. I saw in '85. I saw Slaughter twice in person. Once for the NWA and once for the WWF at the time. Those were both in Baltimore. But when I was going to a fist match, I saw in '84 it was on Daily Motion and also YouTube, so there are clips of it out there. But here's to remember what I was talking about earlier in your mind. One of them actually had the beginning of Sergeant Slaughter's interview, and he talks about the USA Network. And that's the thing, in 1984, when I was going to school, the cable company there, we didn't have an Ashland yet, but where I went off to school, it had the USA Network in their cable package. And that's when I really started getting to see a whole lot of the WWF at the time, right around May, June, July of '84, because of where I was at school at, and I worked in the summer there. They had that USA Network as part of their cable package. And so I remember seeing, Sergeant Slaughter, or my buddy, my best friend growing up, he's still my best friend to this day, he was a huge Sergeant Slaughter fan. And I took him backstage one time to the WWF up here, and Sergeant Slaughter spoke to him. And he was a grown man. He's 30 years old, 32 at the time or something. He popped big time, man, that Sergeant Slaughter, spoke to him. My buddy's a real big old guy, and I think they thought he was there to work or whip someone's ass. I don't know which. But yeah, he popped for fucking Sergeant Slaughter. But yeah, anyway, I go off on a fucking tangent, but that was number 7, the boot camp match between Sergeant Slaughter and the Iron Sheik. I'll quit rambling, Jeremy. Go ahead. Tell us about number 6.
It's quite all right. So we've talked a little bit about this one before, but number 6 is Roddy Piper versus Greg the Hammer Valentine, 1983 Starrcade dog collar match.
Man.
This is another one of those matches that lives in infamy. It was a legend that, a lot of people didn't see it, but if you got a wrestling magazine, you always read about it. Your uncle talked about it. He knew somebody who was there and got covered with blood at the, the edge of the ring. This match is just fucking brutal.
Yeah.
It's just brutal. And it's a little bit different in that usually when a wrestler gets opened up, it's on the forehead or the top of the head. This one was a little different, wasn't it, Bobby?
Yes. And I'm the one that had that uncle that had I saw this on a magazine, and I'm that same guy. I saw it in a magazine, the same thing you said, man. just read about it and then you heard about it because someone was there and this and that. But what happened, I guess, of course, we didn't know at the time. But like you said, instead of gigging on the head, man, I guess when I just saw about, I don't know, the last couple of weeks, honestly, Greg the Hammer Valentine doing a shoot interview, and I guess he hit him with the chain on the ear, and I guess his ear just exploded as far as the cartilage. Is that correct?
That's the way I understand
busted
it.
Up the very top of it. I guess it pinched, either bashed his ear into his skull and it bled, or the chain, hit it just the right angle to where it busted that cartilage in his ear, and they just went with it. They're two tough son of bitches anyway. And I guess I wasn't in the ring, like I said, but I would imagine, because I've kicked the eye before and got a black eye, and soon I turn around and say, hit me, and go down and come up and selling it, and it's right there. And I imagine Piper being as tough as he was and Hammer just being relentless as he was to the heel in that particular match. They both kind of were, but Valentine more so. That's really how you turn someone too. And when he hit him with that chain of ear, I guess it just really fucking exploded, according to Valentine, and the blood was fucking everywhere. And I don't know how their necks even took that. My God, man, that was a brutal fucking match. Once we got older and we got to go back and see it, I was like, holy shit, man. I had a buddy of mine get ready to do a dog collar match, and this has been several years ago, and he brought me that one, and just kind of, we watched it, and he was just kind of getting my input, and I was like, holy shit, man. So I had, up until now, recently, I hadn't seen it for several years, but it's one of those things, like you said, man, it just lives in infamy, man. Because you saw it was iconic on the magazine covers or in the magazines or wherever you first saw it or heard about it at.
Yeah. So. It was legendary. I interviewed an indie wrestler for Geekish Cast a little while back, Robbie Vegas.
Yes, good guy, it seems like.
Yeah, and I was when I was talking to him, I was saying stuff like, as I've gotten older, climbing a ladder seems scary to me. And
I'm right there with you.
Yeah.
I'm not laughing at you, I'm laughing with you.
Oh, no. And when I watch wrestling matches, I look at everything and go, that's like all ladders. That's like a room full. I don't want to do any of that shit that they're doing. And the idea being like, look, if I were to slip and fall right now, I'd have to lay on the ground for a minute before getting up, And when you look at two guys jerking each other around by a dog collar on the neck,
yeah,
I can't even imagine the pain and frustration, irritation that would be following me for 2 or 3 days after that.
Weeks, maybe.
Yeah.
Or in my case, a fucking lifetime.
Oh yeah, that's you guys. The amount of abuse you do to your bodies is just stupefying to me.
Man. Yeah. But yeah, we've talked about that match before, and it comes in at a strong number 6. Of course, it could have been higher, but on this list here, I think we're getting ready to go into the top 5, and we hope you liked 10 through 6. And I'm going to rewind real quick. Number 10 was Star Wars 87. Number 9, the Tupelo, Mississippi concession stand brawl. Eddie Guerrero and JBL from the Judgment Day 2004. Sergeant Slaughter versus Iron Sheik in a boot camp match from June of 84. And just now the Roddy Piper match against Greg the Hammer Valentine in a dog collar match from 1983. And I think we're going to jump a couple years ahead, and you're going to bring us number 5 because this has one of your main men involved in it.
Yes, it does. And before we do that, everybody, I want to remind you, you can get Bobby's books, Pin Me, Pay Me, by going to tinyurl.com/blazebook1, and his other book, I Kicked Out on 2, The Education of a Wrestler, by going to tinyurl.com/blazebook2. And with that being said, we go to number 5, Magnum TA versus Tully Blanchard in a Cage I Quit match at Starrcade 1985.
Man, tell us about it, because I didn't find footage on this.
This was just
one of the
nasty.
ones I did not. I went and tried to watch as much as I could from the list that you sent, also from the things I had already written down from memory. I did my first 5 from memory, and then I started going, and then we had several people write in. I went through some of those matches. I didn't go to this match, and I don't know why. I have no excuse, so I'm not prepared for it. I'm just not going to bullshit my way around it. So please, I'm going to let you take over this whole, I hate to put the weight on your shoulders, but I'm putting the weight on your shoulders.
No problem at all.
I did not do my homework on this match, and I should have.
This was,
fourth day I could have, but I didn't.
Yeah, this was a nasty one. if there was a lot of wrestling in there, it ended after a minute or two and just became them just beating on each other. Broken chairs got involved. They were both covered in blood. There does come a point where after Magnum has already won, he picks up a piece of the broken chair and continues to gouge Tully with it before just grabbing his belt and leaving. I mean, it was just nasty looking.
Right on.
I mean, it's bloody, but the brutality of the match itself, there would be no way to make something look this nasty without them bleeding like pigs. And I wanted to bring up something real quick. So Tully Blanchard's dad was Joe Blanchard, who ran a wrestling federation in South Texas, I believe. Bobby, what was the name of that one? Do you remember?
Oh, shit. I almost want to say Southwestern, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, I think it was Southwestern, yeah.
I think it was. When you said that, I was like, wait a minute, are you trying to trick me? You know what? I think it was Southwestern, if I'm not mistaken.
So Joe Blanchard's show actually had the time slot on USA that the WWF event.
Yes. I swear I watched there's a really good match. It's Dory Funk Jr. and Dickie Slater, and I watched that on YouTube, but I want to say that it was called Southwestern. I don't want to have to pull it up during the middle of the podcast, but yeah, I know where you're going, but that's. Anyway, go ahead.
I was going to say.
I just want to say I think it's Southwestern.
Yeah, I think you're right. I should have looked at this because normally I could have told you, and all of a sudden I'm blanking. But apparently, in the early days or those days when Joe Blanchard had that time slot on USA, they would often cut away from the show early because it got too gritty. And I think Tully might have learned something there, but definitely Southern Wrestling had the edge on everybody when just making a match feel real and gritty and brutal, and this one did it to a 5-star standard. Yeah,
I'm going to have to go back and watch this particular match because I know both these guys are just tremendous workers, wrestlers. Both have had from my understanding, really good, amateur backgrounds as far as football players, as far as wrestlers and those type. When you got two athletes like that, I don't see how they could not have had a good match and be a 5-star match. And so with that said, that's the thing is off this list, I can go back even as a fan myself now and have something to look forward to one evening and say, I'm going to try to find that match. And I've got two big disc full of fucking matches I haven't watched forever. I may even have that match on there for all I know. But I'll find it and watch it, man.
Yeah, it's a good one. It's worth watching. Also, Bobby, I know you didn't watch All In, but there was a women's match where Tessa Blanchard came down. It was a 4-way. When she comes to the ring, both Tully and Magnum are standing in the aisle as she comes in.
Oh, man, really? I'm getting chills, man.
No, it was pretty cool. It was pretty
I know
cool.
She's very, very talented. A local promoter here told me he may be trying to bring her in. I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but if so, it's about 45 minutes away. I'll definitely try to make it just to see her in person because I've seen some of her footage. She looks tremendous, man.
She is, and she is just as much of a shitty little heel as her dad was. I don't know.
Well, I'll mark out for her.
Yeah.
What the hell,
you know what? Honestly, I'd watch her read a phone book if she could carry that much attitude through it. And also because she's kind of hot too. But she is just the way she comes to the ring and everything. She is just like cocky heel all over. And it's fucking amazing to watch. I'm
awesome,
pretty stoked about that. But that was Magnum versus Magnum TA versus Tully Blanchard at Starrcade in 1985. And we're going to go to number 4. I'm going to let you intro this one, Bobby.
Yep. I'm going to intro it as you can, and then I'll let you give the specifics. How's that? Mm-hmm. But you can go on this one here, and you could probably find it, and we could probably do a top 10 on either of these guys individually. But it's the original Sheik versus Abdullah the Butcher. And you can probably go to any Abdullah the Butcher match, and it's going to be fucking a bloodfest out there. But you can go to any match with the Sheik, and there's probably going to be a bloodfest out there. At least one guy is going to bleed. And in this incident, you can go to any of them, Google, YouTube, whatever you do to get your, what do you got stuff on home or whatever, home video or whatever. Get it out, man, because you can go to any match. But the main one, both of these guys bleed. And Jeremy, I think you got a specific match that you want to talk about.
So, I'm going to talk a little bit about it because I still need to dig into it a little bit more because as I was trying to find the bloodiest match between the Sheik and Abdullah the Butcher, the one date I kept coming back to, or the one show was December 1st, 1980 in Japan.
Okay.
And so apparently this, and you got to remember, Japan was about 20 years ahead of everybody in garbage blood wrestling, you know, and I'm not using garbage as a pejorative. I'm using it as a descriptor that when a match is just bloody and fucking gross,
yeah,
it falls into that category. You know, one of the rumors about the Sheik was he used to keep little zip tip razors taped to his fingers. Now his son has denied this. But when you watch his matches, it makes sense that he could just zip somebody at any point, and that was that.
Yeah.
Abdullah, you know, as much as I disagree with a lot of what he did, like working with hepatitis and not telling anybody,
right?
That man put it all in the ring every time he went in. And when you got these two guys together, it was just a bloodbath. And you could tell that people were just getting sliced open every which way. And so apparently, though, the one to look for if you really want to see the bloody match between the Sheik and Abdullah is December 1st, 1980. How old would the Sheik have been in 1980?
Oh, man. I don't even know.
He started in the 50s, right?
Yeah, he started in the 50s. He'd have been up there, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he wrestled up into the 70s, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Seemed like he did. The thing I remember about these matches is the Sheik supposedly had a pencil. That's what he used, with a fucking pencil. Or we all thought we saw a pencil and he was stabbing someone in the head or whatever. And then Abby, of course, was known for that fork. Mm-hmm. And it's one of those things. I've got a picture. I'm going to have to find it of me and Abby sitting together holding some belts from over in Ohio for Bobby Fulton's promotion way back in the day. And, man, just, I don't necessarily agree with some of it, like you said, out there doing some of the stuff he done. But the night I saw him, I'm going to kind of do a segue here for this next match. Bobby Fulton had him up for like a 3-day run, and like the first night in, it was him and Cactus Jack in the main event. And this is about 93, maybe 94. And I remember Bobby coming into the locker room, the heel locker room, and saying, he's big on kayfabe anyway, but he said, hey, Abby, listen, man, I need you to do me a favor. We was in a school in Maysville, Kentucky. I never will forget that. And I didn't team with Abby. I actually did a singles, and also I teamed with Rip Rogers, my good friend out there, man. Learned so much from the Hustler. But Bobby was always, like I said, we talked about before, he was underrated, Captain Nervous. But he told Abdullah, he goes, hey, the principal of this school don't want you going out into the hall or doing anything in the outside the ring is what I'm trying to get at. Yeah. But as soon as fucking the door opened, because Abby said, watch this, and man, Jack was coming the other way, and Abby was coming, and they met in the hall. I don't think Bobby said don't wrestle in the hall. They met in the hall and started brawling, and they busted through a gate that had the soda machines blocked where you couldn't buy the snacks, that they sell at school, because they wanted you to buy the concession stands. And they went right to the gimmick table, right where Bobby Fulton had all his T-shirts and pictures, and they went right to Bobby's table, smashed it. They were both bleeding, and I know it's not the Sheik, but it was his Cactus Jack, and it's going to be one of our next ones. But them two fucking was bleeding and wrestling outside or fighting outside the ring before they even rolled in the ring. And by the time they rolled in, Bobby was already ringing a fucking bell. It was just too funny to be one of the boys sitting there watching that, because how the hell are you going to tell either one of those guys, to not battle outside the ring and not to get juice, But so number 4 was the original Sheik versus Abby. And of course, I told you Abby's story, and that's going to lead to the guy he was working in that match. And that is from 1995, the final of the King of the Death matches, Cactus Jack versus Terry Funk over in Japan, with the exploding barbed wire, Jeremy.
Yeah. So this is literally the only exception we made for this kind of match. The ring was wrapped in barbed wire. They had C4 that went off at 10 minutes. Okay, so Terry Funk is a legend of hardcore, and he earned that title, I believe, at the age of 48. So an age most people would have retired from his generation. Cactus Jack obviously is Mick Foley, and Cactus Jack, bang, bang, was just a fucking lunatic. And these two guys, I think, had some kind of death wish every time they wrestled. I don't know any other way to explain it. They were willing to wrap their heads in barbed wire and get it blown up, all for the fans watching. They got soaked in blood. I mean, Terry learned how to do a moonsault at 50 years old.
Yeah.
This match is, you can find it. The ones I found had Japanese commentary. I don't know if anybody's ever laid down an American English track for it. It is worth watching. It is kind of disgusting.
Yeah. I don't know if it's this particular match, but I know the Insane Clown Posse, I guess, they voiced over some Terry Funk and Cactus Jack, the Cactus Sack and matches, and from my understanding, Cactus Jack approached them, as did Terry Funk, and they got some royalties off of that because they apparently went behind and had this DVD they put out. They fucking just voiced over that fucking, you talk about infringement, man, and copyright, you know.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I guess it was selling, you know, all these fucking shows they do or whatever. But again, I'm pretty sure that this was one of the matches that they used on there. One of the things I remember was I didn't go to Japan until 97. And, of course, I don't read Japanese, but I can see the pictures. And they got these wonderful, wonderful pictures in all the Japanese magazines. And I used to bring them home with me. One of the magazines while I was on a tour, and I don't know if it's because it was like a 2-year anniversary, because we're saying this match was in 95. I don't know if it was, like I said, I can't read Japanese. I don't know if it's for, you know, another promotion, or if Cactus Jack or Terry Funk was coming over for another promotion, or what the case was. But there were some pictures in one of the magazines from Japan I got to see. And I was over for the first time like April of 97, then again in July of 97 for 3 to 6 weeks each time. I think the first time was 3, the second time was 6. So during one of those tours in 97, someone had a hell, it could have been a magazine from 95, you know, because they knew I was a fucking Terry Funk fan. I don't know. Again, I don't read Japanese. I could read a number of someone, you know, if it's, you know, printed properly. But I do recall seeing some of the pictures in a magazine, although I didn't see the match, of course, till years later, like many people. Mm-hmm. But that is our number 3, man. Terry Funk versus Cactus Jack, or Mick Foley, Mankind, whatever you want to call him. I don't think the Mankind gimmick I don't think many people bring it up too much. Most refer to him either as Mick or Mick Foley or Cactus Jack, I guess. And then, of course, the middle-aged and crazed fucking Terry Funk, man. What are you going to do, right? What are you going to do?
I've heard so many stories of people, like photographers who were ringside when Terry Funk was wrestling, guys who knew Terry. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you're next to ringside with him and they're like, fuck, I think he's going to kill me. This is a friend of mine. Yeah. So apparently Terry, when he goes in the ring, goes full in.
Yeah.
And yeah.
So.
And I love stories like that.
Oh, I do too. Yeah, I do too. And you know, the thing about it was, now I do know this, and this was about 95. You mentioned that moonsault. He'd done a moonsault in Knoxville at the Civic Coliseum. Him and Bullet Bob Cornette had brought, one of the greatest heel interviews I ever heard was one of Terry Funk's, of course, cutting a promo on Bullet Bob, and I won't do it right now. I'll save it for another time. But, fuck, at the end of the match, we got to do a pull apart. You know, everyone went to the ring and heels and face and all that. But at the end of the conclusion, one of the clues was, you know, they're just going to go through the match, whatever. But Funk got out of the ring and fucking started throwing chairs. Just started throwing fucking chairs. And Bullet was covered these fucking chairs. And then Terry Funk did the fucking moonsault onto the fucking chairs. And like I say, he's probably 50 years old, man.
Yeah.
You know, then. And like, holy shit. But after the moonsault, that was the key, you know, because he's covered in chairs. Go do the pull apart. But, yeah. It was fucking awesome, man, to see him perform. But anyway, so number 3 was Cactus Jack versus Terry Funk in the barbed wire exploding board matches from the king of the fucking death matches. And that's going to take us to number 2, Jeremy. Do you want to introduce or do you want me to?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce this one because, you know, I've said about a few of these matches that they were legendary. This one truly is because only one person recorded it and hardly anybody's seen it, and there's not really any place to get it. The last Battle of Atlanta, last man standing, 1983, between Buzz Sawyer and Wildfire Tommy Rich.
Man, someone say something about juicing out there?
Oh, goddamn.
Yeah.
See, a lot of people these days don't remember Buzz Sawyer, I have to assume. Yeah. But he was kind of a badass. He had an awesome power slam.
Yeah.
And these, you know, I've only ever seen still matches and third-party accounts of this, but it was apparently one of the most brutal things ever done in pro wrestling in America.
Yeah.
Bobby, what do you know about it? Because, like I said, everything I've got's legendary. You know, like Lords of the Ring status.
the things I remember, first of all, I thought it was earlier than that until you told me the date. So you did. I was like, yeah, it was 83 rather. But yeah, I was thinking it was like 80, 81 just because they had such a big feud down there with Georgia Championship Wrestling with Mad Dog Buzz Sawyer and Tommy Wildfire Rich. And Rich was just such a baby face. But Mad Dog, from my understanding, I never met him, but I understand, everyone has their own things to say about him. I understand he worked really, really hard and stiff with people, but Tommy, according to all of his accounts, he just took care of them, So he basically went out there. I think they worked snug, don't get me wrong, but man, they went out there, and I think, Jeremy, and I could be, I want to say it was 2 years ago, someone released that on the network. Now, whether it's still on there or not, I do not know. But you said one person recorded it. They did. I want to say I watched it 2 summers ago, because that's when I was still on Facebook, and someone posted something. I swear I think it was on network. Man, I was sober at the time, so I don't know. That'll be my excuse. But I know at one time it was floating around. Now, whether it's still out there or not, or if it's still on a network or how they do that, someone with more knowledge can find that and go look it up, because I'm sure it is, because I saw it recently. With that said, it's one of those things that's just legendary. Like you said, man, I just know they had that big, big feud. And, of course, younger, I didn't see it live, of course, or anything like that, just pictures through the years and stuff. And you're like, my God, that's a lot of fucking blood. It's just one of those things. It's just a bloodbath in there. And that's why it's number 2. It's legendary. It's at a time when something like that was kind of unheard of, because, even before War Games we mentioned with 87, you got these guys in a fucking cage. It's the last battle of Atlanta. You got your asshole heel prick, being what he is, asshole heel, to the all-American good boy, all-American blonde hair, blue-eyed, handsome, whatever you want to call him, movie-style looks or whatever. Boy looks, Buzz looking like a grown man that he fucking was, and Tommy, still young and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, if you will, and it's just set up the perfect fucking, scenario. And that was in the Omni in Atlanta, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it was pretty much packed house, sold out and all that. But nonetheless, it's number 2 on our list of the bloodiest matches of all time, man. I think and I think we could have said, before we go into number 1, I think we talked about this, Jeremy, any of these 3 could have been the top number 1 before we get to number 1. Is that correct? They're kind of interchangeable, but we did it our method, and we put the last Battle of Atlanta as number 2 for a reason. I'm going to let you introduce number 1, and also with that, why we went with the other 2 as being 3 and number 2, if that makes sense.
Oh, sure. Well,
yeah.
and right before we do that, I do want to tell people, you brought up Hustler Rip Rogers a few counts ago. You can find him on Twitter. He's at Hustler2754. If you want to see a guy with a lot of insight into pro wrestling, follow him on Twitter. I love reading his tweets because it's just so in-depth, so thoughtful, and just so much insight. But with that being said, we go to number 1, The Great Muta versus Hiroshi Hase in 1992.
Yes.
There is a reason that this is number 1 and the others aren't, and it's because the Muta scale of blood loss was based on this particular match. And that is a scale where the amount of blood in a match is compared to how much blood Muta lost in this match. The Great Muta comes out with his face is painted red. Within a few minutes, the paint comes off. Within a few minutes after that, his face is red again, but this time it's blood. Yeah. And it is on him, it's on Hase, it is everywhere in this match. Muta was a great wrestler. Hiroshi Hase was a pretty solid guy himself. They put on a great match while covered in blood, and I will never understand how guys in this match, Eddie versus JBL, once you are that slick with blood and sweat, how do you even try to keep a hold of each other?
Yeah, I don't, man. It's hard enough sometimes in the sweat, like I said last week about me and Bobby Fulton being out there in 100 fucking degree weather and outdoor show and sweating and working. You just adapt, you learn, you do it, you have to. With that said, I was going to say, back up here a second, when you said the Muta scale, that's why earlier when we had number 8 was Eddie Guerrero in the GBL match. That's why that match could have been a lot higher, folks, but we went with this match being number one for that particular reason. The thing about Hase, is he, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if he invented it, but he was the first one to do it, and he showed Dean Malenko and told Dean he could do it, and Dean showed me he had that Northern Light suplex. I know it has nothing to do with blood, but I got to, give props where props is due. From my understanding, he's the one that come up with the Northern Light suplex. With that said, I wasn't familiar with this match until it was sent to me, and then, which I appreciate that, and then also several of the lists I kept getting all contained this match. And, man, I'm going to tell you, I enjoyed the match. It's not just because it's a bloodbath, with Muta's, like you said, redundant. He started off with a red face. It got clear. The face paint was gone, and then boom, it's blood red. I enjoyed the actual match before the blood and with the blood. So I would give this a fucking high rating match without blood. You know what I'm saying?
Yep. So
I think that was a solid, top 10, with number one being, the Great Muta versus Hase from 1992. Man, that was a fucking crimson mask, as you say.
Yes,
that
was
right?
absolutely a crimson mask. That's the thing, is this is a great wrestling match.
Yeah.
Where they got bloody. There's a couple matches on here where they are bloody matches where they did some wrestling. Even Magnum and Blanchard, that was mostly just a brawl with them poking each other with sticks and shit. This was a good wrestling match with a lot of bloodshed. I do believe, Bobby, if you do go look for this, all the commentary tracks are in Japanese, though.
Okay.
I do believe.
I watched it, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Hey, maybe we should do our own commentary tracks and sell DVDs.
That'd work, probably. You got a great voice for that. But you know something? I just fucking thought of something. You know who the fuck? We left someone off this fucking list of bloodiest matches, man. Fuck. You know who we left off?
Oh, God.
Man, seriously. Are you thinking who I'm thinking? Or
well, it can only be one person. It's got to be Bruiser Brody, right?
That's exactly. How the fuck did we get through 10 matches and not mention fucking at least have one Bruiser Brody match? Fuck.
Well, what the fuck
I'm happy
with
our top 10. Let me say that, but god damn it.
How did we do that?
Oh, fuck. I don't know, man. I don't know. Fuck. You was talking about doing voiceovers, and my mind just drifted, and I was like, fuck, man. We had 10 of the bloodiest matches of all time on our top 10 bloodiest matches, episode 20 on the Bobby Blaze fucking podcast, the Bell to Bell, and we didn't have a fucking Bruiser Brody match listed. Oh, Jeremy, I gotta get out of here, man.
I'm kind of embarrassed now.
Oh, fuck, I'm blood red, laughing and cheeks swelling up, my fucking eyes were squinting. I'm like, what the fuck?
Well, you know what, we've got all of October shows are planned, so I think maybe when we come back in November, I think we'll address this.
Maybe. We'll see. I'm sure one of the fans out there will have something to fucking say.
I'm sure, yeah. Well, with that said, Bobby, you got anything you want to close with besides just...
hit us up at the Bell to Bell Blaze podcast on Twitter, or hit Jeremy up at the Geekish Cast, or myself at Bobby Blaze 744 on Twitter. Find a fucking Facebook page, like us, share it, do whatever, buy a fucking book. And I'm just going out here embarrassed, man, that we left the Bruiser Brody match off this list, man. I'm out of here. Peace out, my friend.
Yeah. All right. Well, shit. Now I feel fucking stupid. All right, everybody, for Bobby Blaze and myself, Jeremy Vilm. Bobby, did you hear that?
What's that, man?
Okay. Nothing. I just thought I heard somebody in the room with us. But for Bobby Blaze and myself, Jeremy Vilmer, bye-bye, everybody.
I don't want to scare anyone, but I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason. His body was never recovered from the lake after he drowned. And if you listen to the old-timers in town, they'll tell you he's still out there, some sort of demented creature. Surviving in the wilderness, full grown by now. Stalking. Stealing what he needs, living off wild animals and vegetation. Some folks claim they've even seen him, right in this area. The girl who survived that night at Camp Blood, that Friday the 13th, she claims she saw him. She disappeared 2 months later. Vanished. Blood was everywhere. No one knows what happened to her. Legend has it that Jason saw his mother beheaded that night, and he took his revenge. A revenge that he'll continue to seek if anyone ever enters his wilderness again. And by now, I guess you all know, we're the first to return here. 5 years. 5 long years he's been dormant. And he's hungry. Jason's out there. Watching. Always on the prowl for intruders. Waiting to kill.